All right, forecast. Yes, perfect. So we first of all go over the dollar, of course. Then let me actually line that up perfectly. On the weekly, same exact story. Now on the daily and the 4 hour is where it gets interesting. We talked about potentially sweeping swing highs right there before we continue lower. At least it's a possibility, of course. When CPI happens and we want to continue lower, it's likely going to seek a premium rate to continue lower from. At that moment in time, we did not have a fair value gap as a premium rate. So the premium rate we can continue lower from are these swing highs right there. Now, with that being said, for myself, I did not really see any great opportunities. So I was still on the sidelines, and in other pairs as well, didn't really see good opportunities myself. So that is why I personally did not get involved with CPI as well. But this was nice price action, and we can study this, and this is how we understand how price or how news moves that price action, where you first have that fake move and then you get the real move right there. So don't let that fake move fake you out in that sense. If overall you're expecting bearish prices, then it's seeking a premium rate right there. You then get the entry pattern. That is the exact sign when you can enter to continue lower as well. So that is what we talked about in the previous forecast, and we see it playing out currently, where if we do want to continue lower, then I would want to, or I would like to see lower price as well. Now, tomorrow is still very volatile. So tomorrow we still have a lot of volatility in the US dollar. So could still be very interesting to continue lower. If we keep that in mind and take a look at ES, then right here, what we are seeing is we did not come into the daily fair value gap, but we did come into overall order blocks right there, fair value gaps, huge wick to the downside, which still the same premise for me. I like these highs right there, which we can now target. The only thing I would like to see is on the 1 hour right here, with equities open and before equities open. If we are hovering something along the lines of this, and we have a sting lower, the same we would want to see with CPI, then we can find that entry pattern right there, any discount rate, swing low, whatever it may be at that moment in time, to then look to continue higher. That is very nice, and I would love to see that. NASDAQ, same exact story, where I would like to see higher prices right here as well. Continuing higher towards this draw on liquidity. That is my thought process. And that is the same for YM. Although, again, like I've been mentioning the whole week, I prefer NASDAQ and ES currently. Then on DAX, where DAX, like we see, has not been going higher, has been going lower actually right here, which we also mentioned already very early on in the week, which was a weird sign that we did not create a daily fair value gap higher. So at that moment in time, I just want to take a step back, don't really want to do anything. Then on Australian dollar, US dollar, and right here, I do have to say that it's been quite slow still, but we have swept those lows. Now, whenever I see a very long wick, and you can probably tell what kind of wick that is, because this is, if I'm not mistaken, that is NFP, an NFP wick right there. And whenever we have a news event and we have a very long wick to either side of the market, I ignore the wick. And the reason for that is, to give you the logical explanation behind that. Whenever we have a long wick, and wicks in general, right, are not universally agreed upon. Because I am looking at a Forex.com broker. So the wick I'm seeing right there was based on a Forex.com, where if I move on to FXCM or Oanda even, the wick is going to be a little bit different, because, simply said, it's a different broker, where different price action, or price action in general, is also a little bit different. They are similar, but they are different. So what I like to do at that moment in time, I like to ignore the wick, the long wick, and you look at the body of the candle. So this is what I do in my mind, right? I ignore this wick sitting right there. Let me find it. And I just look at it like this, where currently I can see, well, we swept some nice lows and we have a nice ST potentially going higher, which aligns with the idea of the dollar going lower potentially. So this is, to be honest, it's quite interesting right there. If we can get something tomorrow, I definitely could be very interested in that ST right there to continue higher off of. Looking quite interesting in my opinion. Euro US dollar, nothing much to be honest. And here I would still want to wait. Still not that clear on what it wants to do here. Still not super clear. GBP US dollar, same story where we do have the volatility. So if we get a 4-hour value gap higher, we have volatility supporting the ID currently of going higher. Overall, we can see that this week just, well, it's of course what we also expected because we had overall lack of volatility. And we are just clearly seeing that lack of volatility when we are still starting up in the year right now. New Zealand dollar, US dollar. Same exact thought process as Australian dollar, US dollar, where we also have this ST, so that could be very interesting heading into tomorrow as well. US dollar, Canadian dollar. This is what we mentioned as well, right? Where we can look to potentially sweep this high during CPI right there to then continue lower and create the real ST. And that is exactly what we're seeing. And why does that happen? Let's dive into that again and let's refresh our mind here. That happens because this ST, the ugly ST that we had sitting right there, simply said, had no news supporting the ID of actually pushing lower. So the ID again was there, the price is agreeing, time is simply not agreeing. Where if we create this ST lower right there, that is when time and price are agreeing. So that is when we when we can expect lower prices. So that is again a refresher for that time and price. US dollar CHF, we did not come into the weekly value gap this whole week. So here I just don't really want to do anything as well. So I'm also going to add this to the breakdown list because I'm not going to look at it anymore. US dollar JPY, let's see. We came above that previous week high in the form of that swing high. Currently we are in a daily value gap. I want to get more clear signs on what we actually want to do. And if we come into the daily value gap and we try to push higher and we fail to do so and we get an unusual context going lower, then I would love to get involved as well. Silver, let's see. Silver, we are below that low. And I mentioned at the beginning of the week actually that if silver wants to continue higher, then the discount array it will likely seek is this swing low to sweep that to then continue higher. So if the dollar here wants to continue lower, then we have this beautiful ST to continue higher off of on silver as well. So that could be very interesting heading into next week. Potentially even Friday, where we can look to potentially capitalize on this as well. Gold, let's see. Gold, we also have a sweep of this swing low. Do we have 4-hour ST right there? 4-hour ST in the making. If we can continue higher, could also be very interesting. Then silver and gold are starting to clear up again. Bitcoin, let's see. Bitcoin, now we had a sweep of this high and now we definitely had a sweep of this high sitting right there, the eventual target that we had. So here, since we are sweeping this, I now want to create that unusual context for that usual context. Excuse me for the sneeze. Then what I want to do right there is we now are creating unusual context. I want to find usual context to target something lower. So what can we target lower? Well, on the monthly, we have a few monthly value gaps in the making as well, which we can take into account, this monthly value gap in the making. And we can look to potentially still target this weekly fair value gap as well, which is quite interesting. Then crude oil, let's see. So here as well, nothing really has been going on and this has just been consolidating. I still think that there's a good chance that we are likely reaching for the monthly value gap to then continue lower off of that. I just don't want to do anything right now. I want to wait a little bit more. Nifty, which is currently actually continuing higher after sweeping that swing low right there. Quite interesting. So if we can look to continue higher, do I want to get involved? Definitely not. And the reason for that is because we're still just super high overall and we've been only expanding, no real retracements. Then if we take a look at the two pairs that I am potentially interested in heading into tomorrow or heading into today actually, is Australian dollar, US dollar. And my thought process is right here, in 48 minutes, we have this 4-hour value gap. Now, I am heading to bed before that, so I might wake up still with a 4-hour value gap or in the midst of it expanding higher already. If we have something and we sting into the 4-hour value gap right there, and we continue higher off that, we have 1 hour value gaps, 15 minutes for value gaps higher, then I would love to get involved as well to catch something this week. Same for New Zealand dollar, US dollar sitting right there. Could be quite interesting. So this is where the Friday can definitely be very volatile as well. So this is where Friday, we can definitely look to potentially capitalize on that ID. If I wanted to capitalize right here on the ID, which of course I would love to, I would want to look at Australian dollar, US dollar, New Zealand dollar, US dollar. I would prefer Australian dollar, US dollar simply because of the fact that this bullish fair value gap in the making is just more clear. Where New Zealand dollar, it's a little bit more, the fair value gap becomes a little bit smaller. Then next to that, I also would want to look at ES and NASDAQ right there, which are both really interesting in my eyes. All right, perfect. Thank you.